Wow, look at this group. You are an impressive group indeed. Right from the beginning, as I was thinking, oh, please don't read that whole bio, and he decided not to, I was thinking that so many times you hear these bios, but you really don't know that the speaker who's come really is hoping for one thing. And that one thing that I'm hoping for is that in all the things I say, that I say something that's important to you that you can take back and use. Not that I said something that was a funny joke or anything else, but I talked about a situation, I talked about a problem, and you felt you got a solution out of it. So that's what I'm after. It's pretty much like the story of the Grand Master of Martial Arts. This was a fellow who, in all his years of experience, had taught karate and kung fu and jiu-jitsu and aikido. He was a master instructor of the martial arts. And he had a fantastic top student. This student won all of the major tournaments throughout the country, time and time again. And in the passage of time, what happened was the Grand Master started to get a little ill. And finally, he's on his bed, he's laying there, he knows his last days are near, and all of his students are parading through to express their thanks to him for all the great things that he's taught them. And then finally, his top student, a master in his own right, comes through, and as he gets near this Grand Master, he looks at him, and he realizes he's got a tear in his eye. He's never seen that before, and he leans a little bit closer, and before he can ask what's wrong, the Grand Master says, "I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. I never taught you most of what I know." There are several things that I know. Some of these things I know through trial and error. I've learned them the hard way. You'll hear a little bit about that. But at the end of the day, I want you to leave with something that has value to you, so that you can put it to work in your community. Let me read you something that I think you'll find interesting. So listen very closely. This is a news article that I read. The article says, "The world is too big for us. Too much going on, too much violence and excitement. Try as you might, you get caught up in the race. Science empties its discoveries on you so fast that you stagger beneath them. The political world is news so rapid that you're out of breath trying to keep up with what's going on, who's in and who's out. Everything is high pressure. Human nature cannot endure anything more." The interesting thing about this article is that it was published in the Atlantic Journal June 16th, 1833. 1833, not yesterday. This whole thing about change is troublesome. And Jason asked me if I would focus most of my comments around change as it opposes small businesses. I would start off by saying that every day and in every situation, you will find challenges. It is the nature of the beast. You have got to be involved in order to deal with it. And as you get involved, you have change. Today in our society, because of our technology, because of our advancements, the world seems a bit smaller. Yet the pace and the rapid challenges of change make the world feel too big for us. So not surprisingly, all of us deal with that a little bit differently. Some of us look at change and we're fearful of it. We're fearful because it seems threatening. And we don't know what we're going to do and how it's going to turn out. There are other people who, in dealing with change, are just a little bit curious about it, but they're encouraged. And they're encouraged because they feel that things may get better. Some way, somehow, maybe they will. But to the confident people find change to be a stimulus because they see the opportunity. They want to engage change because it'll make a difference in their business. There's a wonderful Christian writer that I admire. His name is Chuck Swindoll. And he wrote something that was very simple. He said, life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you deal with it, right? And you've heard that sage advice some other way. Things turn out best for people who make the best of the way things turn out, right? The choices that you and I make during times of change can have a terrific, tremendous impact on us, depending on how we make those decisions. I'll start off by telling you that some years ago, there was a man who lived by the side of the road, and he sold hot dogs. And he'd just stand by the side of the road, and he'd say, "Hey, mister, buy a hot dog?" And people would come from all around. It was fantastic. He knew how to make the right mixes. He bought the right hot dogs. Business was good. So good that he increased his meat order. He increased his bun order. And business was booming. He had to get a larger stove. It was fantastic. Buy a hot dog? Yes, sir, right here. Had a hot dog. So then what happens is his son comes home from college, and things change in this case. In this case, his son says, "Dad, don't you know? Haven't you been paying attention?" He says, "The situation overseas is terrible. And right here in the United States, things are bad." So the old man thinks to himself, well, gee whiz, my son's gone to college. I know my eyes are bad, and I don't read, and I don't watch TV very much. I don't read the newspaper. But he says things are terrible. So he stops putting his sign out. He stops ordering as much for his buns and hot dogs, and business drops off. And finally, the day comes, he looks at his son, he says, "Boy, we're really having a tough time, aren't we?" You know, you just have got to wonder if there aren't people like that every day who have a situation, and because of their outlook, because of the way they perceive things, they're doing just fine. All they have to do is stay the course. But they'll take other information that doesn't apply to them, and they'll think, boy, I've got to change how I'm doing because of that. And in truth, they don't. Time and time again, change, choices, and consequences remind you and me that entrepreneurial success is not just about having a good product. It's not just enough about having a good service. Entrepreneurial success is about how you and I make decisions, whether or not we make decisions well. And if that man who sold hot dogs had not taken down his sign and had kept doing business, who knows, he may have grown from a shack by the side of the road to a drive-through. It may even be one of those popular franchises across the nation today, all because of a decision that he made that was ill-based. Success is not about accepting change by itself. There are three things. First of all, accepting change is important, but making good decisions and good choices are equally as important. And last, it's learning from the consequences. Now, right now, this is all abstract information you're hearing. How does it all connect together? I'll give you that in just a second. But the point here is that change is important. It is the way of the world. And you have got to be involved in it and understand it and decide what the mechanism and impact is on you and your business. If you're writing a strategic plan or you have a business plan, change needs to be one of the considerations. Look at what happened when the pandemic occurred. And whatever the lessons were for you and those lessons were for me in running a business, if we have another one, we're going to approach that a little bit differently, aren't we? Because we've been through that experience. Now, I learned the hard way about several things. I learned that success is not about rolling the dice. It's not a game of chance. It's not a lucky lotto ticket. But success is about three things. It's about having a real vision about what you want to do. A vision. What is that? We'll come back to it. It's about having a viable plan, a plan that will work. And it's about building relationships. Building relationships with people who believe in you and what you want to try to do. For me, I thought, well, I've worked for CIA. I did certain things. I want to come out now and I want to run a business. And I came out and basically fell flat on my face. I came out and thought that because I knew a lot about certain types of things and training and the like, I had a vision of what that was going to be, but my vision was a little bit like Indiana Jones in the Tomb of Doom. If you remember that one scene where he's kind of underground and this big rock is rolling and he's about to be crushed by it, and he turns and he screams to the lady that he's with. She says, "What are we going to do?" And he says, "I don't know. I'm making it up as I go along." Well, I was making up a lot of that as I went along, and it wasn't working. And I went from being an adult who had a very successful career in the government service to being someone whose plan was not working because it wasn't real. And I thought I could do it on my own. And so I suffered from that. And pretty soon there was no money and there was no house. And I was out there trying to make it all work. And I went to the banks, and the banks said, "Let's see your business plan. Do you have a house? Maybe we can give you a mortgage. Do you have a car? How about a car title? Maybe we can do that with you." The bank was trying to work with me as if they're trying to work with you in one way or another, but I was not a good customer at all because I'd put myself in a very bad set of circumstances. So much so that I actually had to sleep in my car some, and then I started sleeping in my office, and finally my landlord kicked me out of the building, and I had to find another place to stay. That was a very humbling time. But you know what they say, the Lord takes all things and works them for good, for His purposes, for those who are called according to His purposes. And He took that time to get my attention in some very real ways. I won't linger here, but you need to know it hasn't always been too many cars and too many places to lay my head down at night. It's been no car and no place to lay my head down as an adult. And that will make you very, very sober indeed. So I was very fortunate. But in all of that, I didn't know that there was somebody who was looking for me the whole time. Couldn't find me. His name is Billy Hicks. Billy Hicks was a guy that I worked at the agency with. Billy Hicks was retired, and he was working for several major DoD companies, like Magnavox, Rockwell, and other companies that you may have heard of, Hughes Aircraft. And he was told to find somebody to do a particular job. So he finally caught up with me after, I guess, a month or two. And he says, "I've been looking for you." He said, "I've got something that you should be interested in." And of course, my mind was still on doing other things. So I said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do this over here. I want to still teach shooting and driving and self-defense and all these other things. And he looked at me, and my dear friend said something that cut me to the core. He said, "You better get yourself a job." And I cried. I cried. It was the truth that I needed to hear. I ended up calling him back, and I said, "Hey, is that thing still a possibility?" He says, "Well, you'll be one of three. I'm supposed to find 3 people, 3 companies who can do this work. You'll be one of 3. I said, "Great." Well, what happened was Magnavox, the company that was involved, Magnavox used to make TVs, for those of you who are a little bit older and know that. They make radios and do all types of unusual things with electronics. And Magnavox sent people out to Virginia. And I was one of those 3 companies. There was a friend who believed in me. So it wasn't only Billy Hicks who believed in me and went out to try to find me, but there was someone else who believed in me who let me use his office because I didn't have an office. So here I am with a potential customer coming to Virginia to see me. I don't have a place for him to sit down and talk. But a friend who believed in me said, yes, I'll let you use my office. And so I thought, boy, what am I going to do? I really don't have a company now. Maybe I can get some friends who will say something about my character. And so I asked 3 friends if they would show up for me and be my in-person character references for these people who were coming from Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is where they were headquartered. And indeed, they showed up, and the Magnavox people showed up. And when the Magnavox people realized these are my friends and they're going to give you references, they said to me, you go sit outside, because they wanted to talk to them without me being in the room. Well, they talked for 15 minutes, and then it was a half an hour, and then it was an hour, and I could hear some chuckles in the room, but I could never really tell what was going on. And outside the door, I stand up, I walk around, I straighten my tie, I do all those things that you do when you're a little nervous and time is passing. And then finally the door opened after an hour and a half, and everybody was parading out of the room. He said, well, that's good, thank you. And I said, well, we didn't get a chance to talk. There's some things I wanted to say. And he said, we don't need to talk to you. We've talked to them, and we've got to get back to Dulles Airport to catch our plane. I was really worried. One of those people was Harry Fitzwater. I'll tell you who Harry was in a moment. But Harry was the last one to come out. He put his hand on my shoulder. He said, I think you're going to be okay. And he walked out past me, and they left me there. I thanked my friend for using his office, and then I went to where I was staying. But they all believed in me. I went, wow. Next thing that happens is they send me a package in the mail. It's called an RFP. Some of you know what that is. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's a request for proposal. And in the government, it's a very thick document, about like a phone book, a telephone book. And it's full of federal acquisition regulations, stuff that not many people know. How the government buys stuff, all the where to, what if stuff. Not many people know that stuff. But I remembered that a lady that I met at the Marriott at Tyson's Corner, and I'd see her in there sometimes shooting pool. And I remember she knew how to write that. So I couldn't wait for Friday night to see her, to see what the story was about that. So I saw her and I said, hey, you know anything about writing this proposal? And she stopped shooting pool. She looked at me and she thumbed through it real fast and threw it on the table. She said, oh yeah, I could write that in my sleep. I said, really? And she said, yeah, no, I can. She said, I don't know anything about security, but if you know all about security, I can write the proposal. You can answer my questions. So I sat at her feet for several days, and she was at the computer just typing things out, printing it out. I'm looking at all the pages, make sure they copy it correctly, get things together. And with the federal government, they don't want just one copy, your original. They want 1 and 15 copies. And you got to get them all, they have to be bound a certain way, and you have to get them in by a deadline, date and time. If you don't have it in by 2 o'clock, 2:05, because of the traffic jam, it's no cigar. Too bad. But I got ours in, and I was so excited. And I waited and waited and waited for weeks, nothing. And so my excitement went back to, what are you going to do now? This is just not going to happen. But this lady believed in me, and she helped me get that proposal in. Well, the next thing that happens is I get a phone call. And the phone call is from a gentleman by the name of Joe Ryder, R-E-I-T-T-E-R, Vice President for Procurement for Magnavox North America. And he says, Julian, Joe Ryder here. Congratulations, you won. Oh my gracious, $800,000 contract. Most of the people are already on the job. What I have to do is be able to make payroll. I have to be able to buy their uniforms, and they would switch from the employer that they're on the job with to being under my umbrella with my trade name and everything else on it. So now I got to get money. So I go running back out to the banks. And I go in, I got a new suit on and everything else, nice tie. And I'd say, okay, I'm here, remember me? And they'd say, oh, yes. I said, well, I've got a government contract now. And they'd say, sure. Do you live anywhere? Do you have a house? Is there a car title? I'm not putting down the banks. I wouldn't do that because I'm on the board of one of the banks today. But boy, I just didn't get it. I just didn't have all of what I needed. And so I'm running around and I'm trying to find places that I can get that money. And I got turned down everywhere I went. Everywhere. I'd get up the next morning, I'd put on a clean shirt, I'd press it, I'd go in, I had my package, I'd tell my story, and they would say, yes, but not now, you're gonna need something more. We can't give you any money. So finally, I saw this lady again who shot pool and told me that she would help out. And she said, boy, she says, I'm sorry to hear that. Have you thought about maybe going back to Magnavox, calling them up and just seeing whether or not they would help you out a little bit? I said, I can't do that. If I tell them that, then they're going to know I'm not prepared, and that's going to be a problem. I'm not going to call them. So she said, well, I think you ought to do that. So I went to Harry. Harry was the one who put his hand on my shoulder as they walked out the door. So he thought it'd be okay. Harry, look, I got the contract, but I don't have enough money. I probably need about $25,000, $30,000 to be able to buy all the uniforms, to make the payroll, and then I probably may have to make another payroll before they pay my invoices. I need to have that much money. Harry looked at me and he said, get in the car. I got in the car. He and I went to the bank. He said, you stay in the car. He went in the bank, he came out, and he handed me a check for $10,000. Harry doesn't look like me. Harry Fitzwater was deputy director of the agency at one time. And he and I had become friends, especially after he retired. And he regarded me to be a bit of his son. I cried. I couldn't help but cry. I couldn't believe that he believed in me that much. I couldn't believe that you would do that for anybody other than family. So I start doing the math. I got $10,000, but it's just not going to work. Won't work. So I happened to see this lady again who I was shooting pool with, who told me to, why don't you smarten up and call them and tell them. And I saw her again and she says, look, I told you 3 times. It's your fault if you fail at this. She says, you should get on the phone and tell Magnavox you need some help. So I got on the phone, I called Magnavox, and I was nervous. And I said, Mr. Ryder, Julien Patterson here in Virginia. Well, sir, I'm calling because, I don't want to bother you, and I know you don't have much time, but I'm calling about, and I was just tongue-tied and fumbling and everything else. And so finally, I got it out, and I said, I'm hoping that there's something you can do to help me start this contract. And Joe Ryder was quiet for a few minutes, and he says, Julien, Magnavox probably has 10 out of the several hundred suppliers and contractors that help Magnavox produce what it does. We have special arrangements for maybe 10. You'll have to solve your problem some other way. And he hung up. And when he hung up, what did I do? You know what I did? I cried again. Because I was so close. What else could I do? So I was still looking for other banks. And I saw this lady again who said, well, did you call him? I said, yes, I did. And about 2 days after that, I got another phone call from Magnavox. Julian, yes, Joe Ryder, Magnavox, Fort Wayne, Indiana. Guess what? You're number 11. Number 11, oh, thank you. 11, what does that mean? Well, what that means is that when you do your payroll, and for those of you in this room, you understand how you're sitting there doing payroll and you're doing deductions and things like that, you'll create an invoice. He says, I want you to create an invoice the same day you do that payroll. You send it directly to me, and I'm going to walk it down to our accounting department, and they're going to pay that invoice within 7 days. He says, that's the best I can do for you. I said, well, thank you. Thank you. Not knowing really what that meant. Then I got off the phone, and I did the math as a function of time, and I didn't need $35,000. With Harry's money, and if I invoiced them, and they turned an invoice around and paid me in 7 days, the whole thing worked. And then that's how Omniplex got started. And Omniplex became, as you can see in front of you, a very prominent company in Northern Virginia. Now, here's the important part. If I don't get this right, I won't be able to go home tonight. That lady that I shot pool with, who knew how to write proposals, her name is Terry, and I married her. Run the tape back. Didn't have a vision, but had an opportunity. Didn't have a plan, but was forced to develop some kind of a plan. And with that opportunity and trying to develop some sort of a plan, it wasn't that I had the credibility to be able to go to a financial institution and borrow. It was because people who believed in me for what I hope is character, honesty, and integrity decided to help me. And because they decided to help me, a universe of things became possible. So you see, it's so important to really understand that you can have a PhD in business, an MBA in business, but if you don't have a vision about what you're trying to achieve, it has to be very clear. It's like you're saying, I want a log cabin on that mountain, 2 bedrooms, garage, looking for a southwest exposure. You have to see it. It's like a picture. And the more you can make what you're trying to do in your vision like a picture that you look at, like that you took with your iPhone, the more likely you're going to be able to succeed. When I say something about a plan, it has to be a viable plan. Plans are not walk straight ahead, straight line. Business plans, because of change, are a situation where you may take 2 steps forward, and then you got to take a step sideways. And then another 2, and you may have to back up a little bit. That's the real world. And your ability to adjust course much the same way that if you're a boat captain and you have a waypoint and you can see that you're drifting off course, you have to make a course adjustment. It's the same sort of thing in business. Your plan has got to be viable. It's got to be real. It's not going to take you to stardom and being a millionaire overnight. But if you're persistent and you see the path, you can start to see a way to make it real. And then this next portion of it has to do with the people. Build relationships with people who believe in you and what you're trying to do. Those are real relationships. I'm not talking about somebody who says, oh, you're trying to start that business? Oh, I know what to do, but I'm not going to tell you unless you sign over half the business to me. That's not a relationship. You don't need that. You want people who believe in you, who are willing to make the telephone call for you, to open the door for you, to call their friend who will make it possible for you to meet with someone else. You want relationships with people who believe in you and what you're trying to do. Those are real relationships. I oftentimes ask the question, how is Luke Skywalker from Star Wars fame, how is Luke Skywalker and Bill Gates, billionaire, how could they possibly be related? And the answer to that is that they were both successful because they had a mentor. Do ask for people who know more about things than you know. Associate yourself with them. Look at the competition. Look at all of the various opportunities that there are out there. But Bill Gates and Luke Skywalker both had a mentor, someone who showed them the path. I actually had, and Terry can attest to it, I had something that we developed called an advisory console. So I actually went to friends who knew about things I didn't know, and one of them was a banker, and he agreed to come on to this console for me. And then another one as a technology specialist. There was a media and PR lady, and I brought everybody together, and they met once a quarter to talk about our business and what we were going through, and we would pose questions to them to get other views and other opinions about how to make good decisions. And sometimes they would open a door for us or do any of a number of other things that made it possible for the business to continue to grow and to flourish. Were they paid big bucks? No. They were there because they wanted to be. And when you get people like that who have something to offer to you and they're not looking to have you cut out a piece to give them, you have to show them that you really appreciate them. You have to give them a real task to do. Don't waste their time. Give them a real task. And then you have to show them that you appreciate them. So find people with a real talent, give them a real task, show them the love. They will help you go forward. So what does that mean for you? Well, you should be writing down a note, memo to self. Create an advisory console or find a mentor. But get somebody who's been down the path and they know exactly where you're going. The Chinese have a proverb that is one of my favorites. They say that if your vision is for a year, plant wheat. If your vision is for 10 years, plant a tree. But if your vision is for a lifetime, plant people. The translation is develop relationships and cherish relationships with people. Wheat, a tree, people. That makes it all real. Just a few other things before I wrap up here. Looking ahead from now to tomorrow, there's several things that I'd like to say to you, but I want you to know that these relationships and having a plan and having a vision is more important than ever before. This world is changing very quickly. And so whether you are a single person in your business, or you have a 2-person team, or 9-person people are in your team, you have got to be alert, you've got to be nimble, you've got to be able to change direction and meet expectations faster than ever before in a business. It used to be that we would say, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's old school. Today, the lead is, if it isn't perfect, make it better. Because that's what your customer expects. Your customer expects what you expect. And today, it's about value added. What are you giving the customer that was unexpected, that doesn't have a cost attached to it, that makes you unique and different and compelling as composed with a competitor? That's what today is all about. Forget all about that. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So the world is too big for us, yes, but opportunities are there and they keep growing. More than anything else, I'd like to ask you to make a commitment, maybe 2 commitments. The first has to do with your place in the market. Think about some ways to diversify, expand your place in the market. Try to determine if you really can add value in one way or another to your product or services. Something that the customer understands that they're getting that differentiates you from all the others. I'm sorry, I have a cold and I'm fighting it, so I'm almost there. The second thing that I'd like for you to do is to look at how you can move beyond where you are. Now, this is something that makes people a little nervous. But look at where you are in the marketplace. Can you acquire someone else? Can you be acquired? Can you form a joint venture with another business? What about adjacencies? Adjacencies are places where I'm in one business, he's in another business, totally different business. He is not my competitor. But my customer looks for his service as well as looks for my product. We ought to have a relationship. We need to figure out how we can form that relationship for good, for both of us to benefit. A lot of people will say, well, what about competitors? Know your competitors. We had great relationships with our competitors. And we fought them and they fought us in fierce battles. But there were times that we did a joint venture. One of our joint ventures was in South Carolina for the Border Patrol Training Center. So we were there training U.S. Border Patrol officers and police officers years ago, back during Bill Clinton's administration. That's hit me right. And so there was a military base there that they completely renovated. We were in charge of soup to nuts, literally. We didn't know anything in that time frame about landscaping, but we had a subcontractor that landscaped the whole place, and it was like a university campus with all of the buildings and everything else and all the parking. We had food service that we brought on as a subcontractor, and we brought on others as subcontractors because they knew things we didn't know. And we knew that if we found people who shared the same values, people who had the same honesty, integrity, and character, we knew that we would be fine. We ran that contract successfully for a number of years. I can't recall how many. But we've done the same thing at other places. We ran the security at the Kennedy Space Center. We did the security for the rebuilding of the American Embassy in Moscow. But at the end of the day, for us, it's no different than being right here in the county. Terry and I work directly with a line cook that's working in the back of Compass, trying to make sure that he or she understands the importance of being on a team and what it means when a team is doing things together and how synchronicity starts to occur when people have the same values and they're moving to the same rhythm. We do the same thing with our front porch coffee house and gathering place as we try to work with every member of that team. We don't come in as the owners, we come in as a coach. We've got managers that run every place, and we try to be supportive to them, problem solve for them, much the same way our advisory council did. So in all of that, I want to start to wrap up by saying to you just a few things. In spite of the challenges of today, there are some things that you need to try to do. It's going to be a little different for you. I'm prodding you, pushing you along, saying, be an agitator. Do things differently. Be a game changer. Be one that's looking around the corner beyond your competition, trying to figure out how to do the same thing differently, how to do the same thing better and cheaper. When you can do the same thing better and cheaper than a competitor, you're changing the game. And that's what it takes today when you want to be different, when you want to be able to be successful against change. So in closing, I want to offer you a short story about change, choices, and consequences, because that's what we've been talking about. This is a story about seizing the moment. There was a soldier, a young soldier, and his commanding officer. And they got on the train together. And as they got on this train, the only seats left were across from this wonderful young lady who was traveling and her grandmother. So the soldier and the commanding officer sit there, and after a while, there's a nice conversation that starts to develop. But as that conversation starts to develop, the young soldier and the attractive young woman start looking at each other and kind of smiling modestly and things like that. And it becomes very obvious that the young lady who's there with her grandmother and the young soldier who's there with the commanding officer have a little bit of appeal for one another. And in the course of all of that, the train goes through a tunnel. When it goes through the tunnel, things get black. Can't see a thing. And suddenly what you hear is of a kiss, and you hear a whap of a slap. And so they're still in the dark, and everybody's trying to figure out what happened. And so the grandmother's thinking, gee whiz, I can't believe my granddaughter kissed him, but I'm glad that she slapped him too. And the commanding officer says, well, I don't blame the young girl for kissing him, but it's a shame that she missed him and slapped me. And the young girl says, I'm glad he kissed me, but I wish my grandmother hadn't slapped him. And as the train proceeds out of the tunnel and the light comes into the cabin, the soldier couldn't wipe the smile off his face. He pulled it off. He kissed the young girl and he slapped his commanding officer. The point there is ingenuity, a reminder of seizing the moment. Moments come and go. See the moment for what it is and seize it. When you have a great idea, somebody else somewhere in a part of the world has it too. You've got to be first to market. And all the things you do, as long as your character, honesty, and integrity is in the foreground, let God take care of the rest of it. He's good at doing that. I would tell you that it's been amazing to me what has happened here in the Northern Net. Terry and I are happy to be able to contribute. What we do contributes to what you do, and it makes it good for everybody. And that's why we do it. So we feel privileged to have that opportunity. I'd ask you to pursue your dreams, really. Pursue your dreams. Come to the networking sessions, meet as many people as you can, interact with them, exchange business cards, get to know them. Try to find ways to create those relationships. Those relationships are what are going to enable you to move to where you want to be. And then lastly, my prayer for you is that you will truly act justly, that you'll love mercy, and that you'll move humbly with your God. Amen. Thank you.